Central and South Florida solve these problems. This is a law firm you can trust, and they actually pick up the phone. They have a 30-year track record of positive results, and they make legal costs manageable for people from all walks of life. Make the call, 1-800-992-1277, or visit them on the web at elkinsandfriedman.com. When you visit, you might even meet Tiffany, the office mascot. Elkins and Friedman take the intimidation and worry out of getting the legal help you really need. Call today, 1-800-992-1277, and begin to make sense of your life. Hello, are you a family caregiver? Are you taking care of a spouse, parent, or loved one who can no longer care for themselves? Are you dealing with Alzheimer's disease and don't know what to do? Are you stressed, burned out, frustrated, and don't know where to turn? Have you realized that your doctor, lawyer, and mental health professionals don't have real practical answers? You need a non-clinical family caregiver expert that the professionals turn to. You need David Levy. He is a family caregiver expert with 25 years of active experience with thousands of family caregivers. He can help you provide a better quality of life for you and your loved one. Contact David Levy at dlevy@caregivered.org. That's dlevy@caregivered.org. Or call 561-482-0086. And let's get your mental road to healing started. The opinions expressed on the following sponsored program are strictly those of the host, guests, and callers, and not necessarily those of this station, its staff, management, or sponsors. Welcome to the Caregiver Reality Show, hosted by gerontologist and family caregiver expert David Levy, speaking on a topic that is not only a national problem, but an international one, and represents one of the biggest dilemmas facing us today: Alzheimer's disease and dementia. With no cure in sight and hundreds more being diagnosed weekly, Alzheimer's is more feared than cancer or heart disease. Join us as David Levy breaks it down and educates, informs, and explains useful caregiver strategies and techniques that 25 years of non-clinical family caregiving have taught him. You can listen or call in and be part of the show. 888-565-1470 to ask your questions. And now, here's David Levy.
Good evening, Boca Raton, America, and the world. This is the Caregiver Reality Show, brought to you on WWNN 1470 AM in Boca. And if you want to call me, I'm at 888-565-1470, and you can see us on the net at caregiverreality.com. Just click on Live Show. And last week, as you remember, if you were listening, we had on Scott Solkoff, one of the eminent elder law attorneys, who I'll be seeing a week from tomorrow at the Florida Coalition on Aging Conference, which will certainly be interesting. And they will be announcing the work of the Purple Panel, which is the group that the governor put together to tell the state of Florida what are its assets and deficits in terms of Alzheimer's. And what we do know, because Scott was good enough to share, that the first thing that he discussed was caregiver education. And I couldn't agree with him more. That's all I do is non-clinical family caregiving, because you don't have to be an expert in Alzheimer's, but you certainly have to know and understand how to deal with the system, how to deal with the paperwork, how to deal with the planning, and do all those things that you were never trained to do, but you're expected to do as family caregiving grows in America. It's not just Alzheimer's, it's not just frontal dementia, it's everything. It has to do with diabetes, chronic illness, whatever's going to put you at home because you're not well is going to be taken care of by the family caregiver. We look at it from an Alzheimer's perspective because that's the toughest caregiving there is. And in case I forgot, this past 4 days I was in Philadelphia. My uncle has come down with very quickly advancing dementia, and trying to get all of the things planned for him, which we had done in advance, implemented, was very difficult. The banks fought us, the doctors fought us, And no matter how carefully you plan or no matter how many years you've been in the business, when you have to go out and do it, you better be ready for a lot of surprises. And right down to, we had effective durable powers of attorney, which means that's the document that says I can speak for my uncle. They're good on site in Pennsylvania. You just have to show them to the bank. We walked into the bank and they said, no siree. We want to see a letter that says he's incompetent. The law doesn't say that. They said, we want to see it on our own form. Well, I said, if he was incompetent, how in God's name could he sign your form? And then we played that runaround for about 2 hours. And I hear it from my clients all the time. I saw it in person. So I went and brought my uncle's attorney down to the bank. And we all left frustrated at 4 o'clock. So I'm leaving it to the attorney to go fight it out. But just like Florida, you got to honor those documents on site. And another thing, this past Thursday, we started to enroll the first 87,000 people on Medicaid in the state of Florida into Medicaid, what I would call managed care plans. And we have 350,000 people that have to get into that program over the course of the next year or so. And even though we have more Medicaid patients than that, that's the goal. And it's going to be tough, and it's going to be difficult. And one of the problems that we see happening is nobody knows exactly what it is they're supposed to do. So it's a good idea. We got to do our homework. Next week when I'm doing my homework on the Medicaid programs that are available, because starting September 1st, they start enrolling in Palm Beach County. So if you've got a loved one on Medicaid and they haven't been in touch with you yet, they will be. But if you think that you can figure out simply from the Agency for Healthcare Administration little bifold what's going on and who you're supposed to pick, no way. And so I'm going to be doing my homework on this, and I'm going to let you know. Because one of the problems that we have here, not only in Florida but in the United States, we're in the middle of the geriatric gold rush. We got the whole country trying to figure out a way to mine aging, dementia, and all of the other problems and frailties that go on as we get to be an older society. And there's nobody that's going to help you. Just because they got some credential after their name doesn't mean they know what they're doing, doesn't mean that they weren't just approved by some organization that they dealt with over the weekend and got a degree. And so I don't say that cynically, because there's a lot of good people out there, but you need to know who you're going to deal with. And when people start coming and saying, I'm a senior authority, I'm certified at this, I'm certified at that, you darn well better do your homework. Don't do any less homework than you do to figure out who is the broker selling your house than trying to figure out who's the broker trying to push you into one assisted living or another. Speaking of assisted living, there was a phenomenal video that played on PBS Frontline last week, and you can see it on pbs.org. And it was called Life and Death in Assisted Living. And what it did, and since it's a matter of public record, they highlighted the largest assisted living chain in the country, Emeritus. And they took a good hard look at one of the facilities that they were running out in California. And it was filled with horror stories and all about folks that had wandered into the kitchen and it wasn't locked up properly and drank the bleach and had all kinds of things go on because nobody was on the shift at night, or if there was only one person. They couldn't watch everybody in the house. And it was very, very difficult. One of the stories revolved around a woman by the name of Joyce B. I won't bother with her last name, but the net conclusion of what went on with her is that no one at Emeritus had any medical training. They had never even met her when they admitted her. And as a result of that, what they discovered after she was there for a while, and they complained about her poor care and behavior, they finally got the state to audit the facility, and what they found was the memory care unit was audited. while she was living there and failed every important test. So you really got to do your homework, because nobody else is going to run in and do it for you. One of the big problems in assisted living, and this is not assisted living bashing that I'm doing tonight, but assisted living came about because nursing homes could not handle all of the folks that needed care. And as a result, the assisted living industry grew up. But the assisted living industry did not want to be regulated to the same degree that nursing homes were. And so they lobbied and they used their private dollars to make sure that the statistics and everything else that had to do with the rules, the regulations, were a heck of a lot easier. Some states don't even have regulation for assisted living. So you really have to keep your eyes and ears open, and just because somebody says, or they've got a name on the wall that says assisted living or care center, you have got to be so careful. Here in the state of Florida, we're well ahead of most other states because we've got some pretty good regulations in place. But once again, if you're going to be an effective caregiver, you gotta do your homework. Don't believe what you hear, and don't even believe what you see until you hear it here. I'm out there doing the homework every single day to bring you folks what you really need to know about what's going on out there. You know, a lot of people go to the internet. The internet's a very interesting place. It's a good place to start to get information. It's not a great place to make decisions, especially about subjects like Alzheimer's and dementia. Whatever you learn, it's difficult to figure out what it's all about. And I'm going to tell you a story when I'm done after the break that will tell you exactly why not only is it confusing to the experts, it's confusing to the scientists. So once again, you got to be careful. Perfect example. If you go on the internet, there are at least 16 to 30 different sites that aren't linked to one another that all will give you an Alzheimer's mini mental test. And depending upon how you score it and what you think you did, all right, it can scare the living bejesus out of you, all right? So there were a group of experts that went online and pulled as many of these Alzheimer's and dementia tests. And you know what they came back with? They found that every one of the freely accessible mental tests didn't line up. They scored poorly on the same scales that the scientific community uses in the valid mini-mentals, the COG-32, a lot of what we normally use for psychometric testing of people with dementia and Alzheimer's. So once again, the internet's an interesting place to find things, but don't make final conclusions without checking with a professional and finding out if what you're reading and what you're hearing really adds up. You know, it's one thing to go on and find a diet, of which there are millions of them, but how do you know the right diet for you? All right, when it comes to dementia, when it comes to Alzheimer's, everybody has a story. And those stories all sound legitimate. And we've been down this road time and time again, whether it's the doctor that said, Enbrel, the psoriatic arthritis medicine, if I drip it in your brain, is going to cure Alzheimer's. Whether it's the people that said coconut oil, and we found all it did was raise your cholesterol and maybe taste good. All of the little things that you see out there and hear out there that are remedies or that other folks say work, be very, very wary. The scientific community hasn't figured it out yet, so what makes you think your neighbor or the guy on the internet knows any more than the experts do? We're going to go to a break. If anybody wants to call and ask a question, it's 888-565-1470. We're broadcasting live on WWNN 1470 and CareGiverReality.com.
Hello. Are you a family caregiver? Are you taking care of a spouse, parent, or loved one who can no longer care for themselves? Are you dealing with Alzheimer's disease and don't know what to do? Are you stressed, burned out, frustrated, and don't know where to turn? Have you realized that your doctor, lawyer, and mental health professionals don't have real practical answers? You need a non-clinical family caregiver expert that the professionals turn to. You need David Levy. He is a family caregiver expert with 25 years of active experience with thousands of family caregivers. He can help you provide a better quality of life for you and your loved one. Contact David Levy at dlevy@caregivered.org. That's dlevy@caregivered.org. Or call 561-482-0086. And let's get your mental road to healing started.
Okay, we're back, and for the second half of the show, hope you have found it interesting. If you want to ask a question, 888-565-1470. As my producer reminded me, we are broadcasting live on 1470 AM, and we are live streaming on the internet at CareGiverReality.com. About 2 weeks ago, one of the brightest women in the healthcare business, who happens to work as a statistician and research expert for AARP, the Association for Retired People, made a presentation before the Congressional Committee on Long-Term Care. And she calls it like it is and the way she sees it. And some of the things that she told that Long-Term Care Commission, I think as caregivers, you need to know and you need to understand. And the first thing that she brought up, and she made 8 points, I'm gonna scan quickly and read them for you, that the unpaid contribution of family caregivers fills the biggest gap in healthcare and the long-term social service system, without a doubt. The role of the family caregiver has been extended dramatically as major providers and coordinators of long-term care and key partners now in healthcare delivery. You know, one of the things next week that I'm going up to the FCOA convention for is I'm getting an award for Best Media this year for our Caregiver Reality Non-Clinical Problem-Solving Manual. It's the first time that a document like that or a book like that has been given this award. I'm very, very honored, but it really is a book about caregiving that truly addresses most things that have nothing to do with the disease, because caregiving is all about planning. All right? One of the other points that she made was that increasingly home care is getting more complex and that caregivers have little or no training. One of the things, as you recall, that I mentioned when we first opened the show, that Scott Solkoff had said the purple panel is saying is most important, is educating the caregiver. How do you do that? That's one of the reasons why the manual that I put together, not just because I did it, but it's based on 25 years of caregiving, dealing with caregivers every single day, running support groups, listening to problems, and understanding that even if you're an expert, as I just told you, and I went up to take care of my uncle in Pennsylvania, and I ran into the same buzzsaw that any of you would, and we had planned it out. But the one thing I can tell you about caregiving, especially when it deals with dementia and documents, the best laid plans normally flip upside down, and you ain't got a chance unless you're really prepared. And preparation takes a little bit of studying, doing your homework, and as I've told you time and time again, an educated caregiver is a more confident caregiver, a more competent caregiver, and one who's able to understand what their options are. Because if you understand your options, I don't care what it is you're dealing with, you make wiser and better decisions because you understand what your alternatives are. And when you're dealing with the health of a loved one or home care where you're responsible or another family member is day and night for what goes on in that house, you better have some understanding about what's going on. And you can't just rely upon your doctor, your lawyer, or the Indian chief, because this is something that's very personal. Every caregiving issue is like a fingerprint. You need to understand your fingerprint, and you need to plan, all right? Because the care gap is widening. The aging population is growing faster than any health care delivery system can grow. Just this past week, Humana bought American Elder Care here in Florida. They have a license to do Medicaid in every county in the state, all right? And Humana is first trying to absorb them and American Elder Care, while I think they're a fine organization, is scrambling to find people. Every one of their shops has got help wanted, help wanted, help wanted, and there just aren't enough competent people out there. So just because they come with a credential, just because they come with a name, doesn't mean that they really understand what they're doing. And the last and most important thing is that family caregivers need better recognition. For years, the clinical system has marginalized the caregiver. They viewed them as the taxi cab driver, the chauffeur, as well as the aide that walked in the door, but the conversation was never directed to them, even though they're the most important eyes and ears in the whole chain of events. And while it may interest you to know that there are about 750,000 long-term care, assisted living facilities that deal with dementia, added to the 1.6 million total nursing home beds that we have, doesn't make up a third of the dementia population if we had to put everybody in a bed. And that assumes that you could pay for it. And if we ever had to entrust Medicaid to pay for every patient that couldn't afford to be in a nursing home for $110,000 to $150,000 a year, it would bankrupt the system. As I've said, right now, the unfunded or the unpaid cost of care produced by the American family caregiver is close to $500 billion, and in the next 15 years will double to $1 trillion if we had to pay them. There's 50 million caregivers out there, folks, and if we just looked at 30 million of them as seriously being active daily or many times a week, could you imagine if they ever woke up one morning and said, I ain't doing this anymore, go hire somebody to do it, let the system take care of it? Where would we find even a tenth of those people? Where would we find in a hurry 33 million more people to go ahead and just take care of the other half of the dementia population that we couldn't put in a facility? You can see what we're heading towards. We can have all the political rhetoric out there. We can talk about Obamacare and what the Republicans say or don't say. There are three things you got to understand, folks. Number one, aging doesn't have a U-turn on the highway. You keep getting older and growing older, and with it come the illnesses and the frailties of growing old, even if you grow old healthy. As a gerontologist, I can tell you that aging in and of itself will not make you ill, will not give you dementia, but it certainly, as we get older, our system is not as strong, our genes are not as healthy. No matter what we do to try and keep it up, our bodies are changing, our metabolism is changing. And as a result of that, do not expect, just as we keep saying, at 90 to be the way you were at 60. And while 70 may be the new 50, all right, when you open up the hood, there's still 70,000 miles on that car. And we all need to remember that. You know, if you think that we have a problem trying to figure out what the research is all about, I'm going to give you a little example. Last week, in the Annals of Gerontology and in the Journal of the American Medical Association Neurology, they came out within 3 days of one another, and the first said, diabetes doesn't seem to affect Alzheimer's disease progression. And that was followed the same day, by saying that amylin, which is similar to amyloid deposits in the brain, may link dementia and diabetes. All right? Two eminently scholarly publications publishing information that is diametrically opposed or opposite one from the other. So if the scientists can't figure it out, and we get almost on the same day 2 different reports about dementia and diabetes, how are you as a family caregiver supposed to figure it out? How does your family doctor figure it out? They rely on these publications to learn a lot because they're not going back to medical school and they have very little time to update their education. So they look at these publications. And one of the big problems is that they all read the top line. every publication out there, whether it's the Journal of the American Medical Association or the Annals of Gerontology, all want to make sure that you read their publications. So the one that can put the most interesting headline out there knows that the PR on the internet and the buzz in the medical community will pick it up. All right? But which one do you believe? Does it not have an association, or does it? We had Dr. Brody on a couple of weeks ago, and he absolutely said, if you got cholesterol and other issues in your blood, you got it in your brain. All right? If you have insulin issues because you're a diabetic, stage 2, it may not cause Alzheimer's, but we know darn well it's going to exacerbate it because our brain and our brain neurons are all filled with the same glucose. And if you're intolerant in your arm and your pancreas, then you're intolerant in your brain. And so never let it be said that any one of these studies, we just can't rely on it. One crocus does not make spring. One of the things that did come out this week, until it gets changed next week, was we did find a very strong association between anemia and dementia. All right? And not necessarily dementia of the Alzheimer's type, but it makes a lot of sense. If you're anemic, it means your hemoglobin and your hematocrit, those red blood cells, are smaller and they don't have enough oxygen. And if your brain is starving for oxygen, then parts of your brain are dying, because just like the glucose feeds the cells, the oxygen feeds it as well. So if you're not getting oxygen to your brain because you're bleeding or because you have anemia, all right, it looks like there's a pretty strong association between the two. And as we get older, we have a tendency to get anemic because our blood cells and our ability to create new ones in our bone marrow and etc. doesn't work as well. That's why a lot of the folks you see and know that are anemic wind up having a kidney issue, and they wind up getting a drug called Procrit, which is one of the precursor chemicals that the kidney produces for red blood cells. It's not just your bones, it's not just your kidneys. Every piece of your body plays a constituent part, has a part to play in what goes on, in how we produce the hormones and chemicals that make our bodies work properly. So can't take any one of these issues alone. You got to look at it, understand it, and be prepared to deal with the unknown. If you want to get a copy of my Caregiver Manual, one of the things it has in there is a 40-page planning guide, all right? Unlike any one that you've seen in any other publication anywhere else. It's the product of 25 years worth of work, all right? And you can purchase a copy of it if you wish on caregiverreality.com. Just go to the store and click on Caregiver Manual. You can also buy the document, the planning guide, by itself. So, you know, we're not trying to sell you more than you can use, but what I'm going to tell you is, if you take that document and you fill it out, you will know what you need to know, where it is, how much of it you have, what do you have to work with, and a myriad of other things that we normally don't find out. In conclusion, I want to say, when I went up to take care of my uncle this week, he never really liked me, and boy, when we tried to find out what was going on and how to dig it out, and we had to go drill out the safety deposit box, I had to sell the car out from under him, and I'm no different than anybody else. So remember, family caregivers, you are the backbone of the healthcare system. You are the backbone of aging. And if it weren't for you, we wouldn't have a healthcare system in America. So I'll be back next week. This is David Levy, gerontologist at caregiverreality.com. And believe me, if you haven't heard it from me, don't believe it. And I'm not trying to be a smart aleck or a wise guy, but I spend all day studying this stuff while I'm talking to caregivers, and I know what I'm speaking about. So from Boca Raton on a very stormy night, I want to say thank you, and we'll see you next Monday, 6:30, Caregiver Reality on WWNN 1470 AM, where we broadcast live, and on .com, where it's live streaming. Thank you very much.
You have been listening and watching David Levy, gerontologist and non-clinical family caregiving expert. Visit our website at caregiverreality.com and hear and see unscripted family caregiver support groups discussing all of the questions that you have wanted to ask but didn't know where to turn. Tune in again next time for more updates and special guests who bring their caregiving experience to you so that you can deal with your problems and hear how family caregiving is affecting fellow Americans just like you. Opinions expressed